Pollyanna and the Frosty Surprise. 11-year-old Pollyanna Whittier zipped through the kitchen of Harrington House like a sunbeam. "Oh, Nancy," she cried, watching the maid scrub the heavy iron pots. "Isn't it a perfectly grand morning for a walk?" Nancy laughed, her apron dusted with flour from the morning biscuits. "It's a chilly one, Miss Pollyanna. The frost visited us last night and turned the world white." Pollyanna beamed, her eyes wide with delight. "Then I'm glad for the frost. It makes the grass look like it's been sprinkled with diamonds." In the dining room, Aunt Polly sat as straight as a ruler. She did not believe in grand mornings or diamond grass. She believed in duty, schedules, and keeping one's voice at a sensible, quiet volume. "Pollyanna," she said, her eyes fixed on the ticking silver clock on the mantel, "you are 30 seconds late for your morning instruction. Sit down at once." Pollyanna sat, still smiling brightly. She decided she was simply glad her aunt had such a fine, tall chair for her to sit in. After her lessons, Pollyanna skipped down the lane to Mr. Henderson's farm. Usually, his fields were a vibrant sea of bright orange, but today, the pumpkins lay slumped and dull against the frozen earth. Mr. Henderson stood in the center of the patch, his heavy wool coat buttoned to his chin and his shoulders drooping. "It's all gone, little miss," he sighed heavily. "The frost was too hard and too early. My whole harvest is ruined. There isn't a single thing to be glad about today." Mr. Henderson poked a shriveled pumpkin with the toe of his boot. To him, the field wasn't a garden anymore. It was a graveyard of pies that would never be baked and lanterns that would never be lit. The morning air was biting, and the smell of damp earth and frozen vines hung heavy around him. He had worked all summer under the hot sun, and now it seemed the winter had stolen his reward before he could even pick it. Pollyanna hopped over a frozen puddle and took Mr. Henderson's rough, weathered hand in her own. "But there is something to be glad about. We just have to play the game." She tilted her head, her curls bouncing. "We can be glad because now you don't have to spend all week breaking your back to haul these heavy things to market. Think of all the extra rest you'll get. And look, the seeds inside are still perfect. We can save them to plant a garden twice as big next year." Mr. Henderson blinked, a slow smile finally tugging at the corners of his beard. Pollyanna didn't stop there. She gathered a few of the firmer salvaged pumpkins and hurried back to find Nancy. Soon, the kitchen at Harrington House smelled of sweet cinnamon and pungent cloves. "If we can't sell them," Pollyanna told Nancy as they stirred a large, bubbling copper pot together, "we shall make spiced pumpkin butter for everyone who is feeling lonely. It's much harder to be sad when your toast tastes like a holiday." With a warm jar of pumpkin butter tucked into her basket, Pollyanna visited the great, gloomy stone house of Mr. Pendleton. He was a man who lived in the shadows, rarely speaking to anyone in Beldingsville. When he opened the heavy oak door, he looked as gray and stern as a rain cloud. "What is this?" he grumbled, his voice echoing in the empty hall. Pollyanna handed him the jar. "It's glad butter, Mr. Pendleton. It's made from the frost's mistake. I thought you might like a taste of sunshine." Mr. Pendleton stood alone in his grand, silent hallway, holding the warm glass jar. The scent of nutmeg and cooked pumpkin drifted up to him, reminding him of a time long ago when his house wasn't so quiet and cold. He looked at the bright orange spread and then out the window at the crisp, clear autumn sky. For the first time in many years, the silence of the big house didn't feel quite so heavy or lonely. He realized he was glad she had knocked. When Pollyanna returned to Harrington House, the sun was setting, painting the sky in streaks of brilliant pink and gold. Aunt Polly was waiting on the porch, her arms folded across her chest. She looked ready to scold her niece for being late, but then she saw Pollyanna's wind-swept hair and the happy smudge of pumpkin on the tip of her nose. "You are late for dinner again," Aunt Polly whispered, but her voice didn't sound like a sharp ruler anymore. It sounded almost soft. That evening, Aunt Polly found a small jar of pumpkin butter on her own bedside table with a messy, handwritten note. "I'm glad you're my aunt. She looked at her reflection in the mirror and, for the first time in a long time, she didn't look for a stray hair or a wrinkle to fret over. She took a deep breath of the cinnamon-scented air and smiled. Not a duty smile, but a real one. The frost had come to Beldingsville, but inside Harrington House, things were finally starting to thaw.